online. So a formal welcome, good morning to this class. Today we're going to focus on a number of important things. We're moving on to a new section now in theory. And everything that you have learned so far is going to contribute to helping you understand what we're going to do from today until the end of the semester. So I encourage you to ask questions whenever you are uncertain of something that I'm explaining. There is never any shame in asking questions if you don't understand. If you are concerned about looking like a fool asking a particular question, you can always send me the question through the little dialog box. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see where it says chat, and you can specify on that chat that the message comes only to me, so nobody else would see it. Then I can see your question and try to answer it. Okay, so if that would make you feel more comfortable, I'm happy to take your questions in that way. Okay, I want you to feel as though you are able to ask questions at any point, because I really want you to be able to understand this work well. Okay, now I just want to locate quickly one of the things that I want to use for our class today, which has suddenly disappeared. Sometimes computers do this. Okay, I found it. All right, so we're going to start today's class with a concept which is going to guide us through the whole next part of the semester. And it's called the Harmonic Series. Now, when we deal with acoustic instruments, there is a natural scientific phenomenon that occurs which creates a sense of harmony, which our ears are able to hear and appreciate. Can any of you tell me what the word acoustic means? What does acoustic mean? If I speak about acoustic instruments, what am I talking about?
So I know an example of an acoustic instrument.
Yes.
It would be a guitar.
Yes. Okay. Now, many you'll know that there is an acoustic guitar. Do you know what the other types of guitar are?
No, sir.
Okay. The reason that the guitar has, well, certain types of guitar have the name acoustic guitar is because you can also get an electric guitar. Okay. And the difference is that the sound of an acoustic instrument is produced naturally. Okay, it comes through the string, the nature of the strings and the way that they vibrate. Whereas an electronic instrument or a digital instrument, the sound is produced through digital means. Okay, so in an acoustic guitar, the overall sound effect that you hear is acoustic. Whereas with an electric guitar, even though it has strings, the sound that you are hearing can be manipulated through electronic or digital means. And if any of you are guitar players or have ever played a guitar, you'll know that these days you can do all sorts of things with a little, like a pedal board that you can have while you're standing up playing on the guitar, and you can press certain pedals with your foot or with your toes, and that it can change the sounds according to what you want. Now, on an acoustic guitar, you wouldn't be able to do that. The sound that you produce with the strings is the sound that you get. You can't manipulate the sound besides changing the pitch. But on an electric or digital instrument, you can change that. Okay, so what I'm talking about now is an acoustic principle. It's for instruments that are not digital. So a piano, for example, but it must be an acoustic piano, not a digital piano. It wouldn't work on a digital piano, although the sound that we receive in a digital piano has been recorded from an acoustic piano. It is not acoustic because it doesn't use strings to create the sound, okay? Or a violin. Your voice is an acoustic instrument, okay? You're not using an electronic box inside your voice to create the sound. All right, so that's just an important part to remember, that we're dealing with a natural phenomenon, not a digital or an electronic phenomenon. Okay, so here's how it works. When you play or sing any type of note, a musical note, the musical note creates a sound wave, okay? So the sound waves come up and down, just like the waves that you see when you go to the beach or something like that, okay? They come up and down and up and down. One of the qualities of a musical sound is that the wave or the waveform is regular, so that the height and the depth of the wave are basically the same throughout, okay? Noise that we hear is also sound waves, but the sound waves are irregular, so that the tops and the bottoms are all over the place of the wave, okay? So it's not regular. A musical sound, the waves are all regular, okay? So when you play a note, it creates a sound wave, which our ears perceive and then are able to hear, all right? But, and this is the interesting part, when you play an acoustic note on an acoustic instrument, you are not only hearing the note that you've played. So if you play a note on the piano, for example, your ear will tell you, okay, you're playing C or D or A or F, okay? But at the same time, there are other sound waves much higher that are related to that note, which our ears also hear. And those are called harmonics or partials, okay? Harmonics. Those very high notes, they're much higher than the original note that you play, give the note its quality, what it sounds like. So when I'm speaking to you now, the reason my voice sounds the way it sounds is because the foundational tone which I use is supplemented or has extra little tones much higher that give it its character. Okay, so, or if I played an instrument, for example, if I played a saxophone, it's the partials or the harmonics of each note that tell us that that's a saxophone sound, okay? Or if we listen to some kind of other instrument, like a violin or a musical bow or anything like that, which has a very characteristic sound, it's those partials or harmonics which give us the sound or give it its sound quality. The other interesting point to consider about partials and about harmonics is that they also provide us with harmony. Okay, our first understandings of what harmony is. And today we're going to be learning about how that system works and how it relates to the harmony that we use in our music. Now, you might be interested to know, for example, that in traditional Zulu music, which is often accompanied by the musical bow. I'm sure you've seen those musical bows. They look like a shooting bow. You know, if you've got a bow and arrow, around it, usually some kind of bent stick with a string down the sides that's tightly strung, and then some kind of gourd, like a calabash, that has a small hole in it, where the sound can resonate. Okay, if you play a note on the bow, the main note has all of these harmonics, and it's those harmonics that people began to hear when they were playing the bow. And those harmonics then gave us the concept of the musical scale. So they used those notes from the bow to create the musical notes that they use to sing along with it. Okay, so this is a very natural and universal principle for creating notes that you can use to perform music. So I'm going to show you a picture of the harmonic series. This is from your textbook, so you'll be able to refer to it if you want to. It's on page 30. And I want to show you this diagram. So if you look at this diagram over here of the bass and the treble clef, if we were to play this very low note over here, this low C, on the piano or on any kind of instrument, on a double bass or something like that, when you play that note is called the fundamental. So that's the main note that your ear is going to hear. But at the same time, while that note is playing, all of these other notes, you see these other 15 notes from 2 to 16 are happening at the same time, okay? So when you play that low note, it also sets up all of these other notes playing at exactly the same time, okay? So it has, if you look from here, this is a C, the first note that it plays, and the loudest one that we are able to hear usually is an octave above, so 8 notes above. The next loudest one is a fifth above. So you see this is a G, a C, sorry, this is a C, and this is a G. From C to G is a perfect fifth. Then you have from G to C. Okay, so you see how often C comes. There's C, there's C, there's C, there's C again, and here is C again. C is the strongest note. It comes often, and that's why we hear C, okay? But all of these other notes, the second, the third, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the 9th, the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th partials are also happening at the same time. So we hear all of those notes very, very softly. Now, our ear, for most of us, we can, if we're trained, pick up probably the most to the 4th or the 5th partial, okay? So if you train your ear, you can hear up to that partial. So if somebody were to play that very low C, if you listened very carefully, you'd be able to hear the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th partial. Some people who've really got brilliant ears can hear the 6th and the 7th, and sometimes the 8th partial as well, but that's very, very rare. Okay. Some people manage to sing a fundamental tone and then are able to create these harmonics with their voice. Now, that happens locally. In the Xhosa tradition, women often sing very low notes in their voices, and they manage to get the low note plus one of the harmonics, which you can hear very clearly, and they're able to manipulate going from this note to this note to this note to this note to this note, depending on which one they want, along with the partial over there. So Xhosa women who are singing traditional Xhosa music have this particular way of singing. It's very, very profound and very beautiful, okay? But it requires that you sing very low in your voice so that you can get these higher notes to come at the same time, okay? So it's very much rooted in our local tradition. It's also very much rooted in musical traditions across the world. And it's what gives us the idea of harmony, which we're going to start learning about today. If we look at the first 5 notes here, we've got C, C, G, C, E. Those 5 notes give us the foundation of all of harmony that we use, okay? That creates a major chord. And if you don't understand what that means, don't worry, we're going to talk about that today, okay? So the important thing to know is that in naturally created sound, that is an acoustic instrument, every note creates all of these harmonics or partials, okay? Now, if you're interested about this and you want to find out more about it, I've put up a little video on our Moodle page, and you can go and have a look at it, which describes this in a more scientific way. We don't need to know more about this scientifically than what I've described to you, because it's just an introduction so that you understand where we're coming from for the principles of harmony, okay? But if you are interested and you want to find out, I encourage you to go and watch that video, okay? All right. So now I want to continue with our main topics for today. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you now. So today we are venturing into the very exciting topic of triads and harmony. Up until now, we've been learning about scales and about singing a tune or clapping a rhythm. And all of those have relied on the notes coming one after each other, okay? But you'll know that music doesn't just have notes coming after each other. It also has notes on top of or below each other. So you can have a soprano, an alto, a tenor, and a bass all singing at exactly the same time. Okay, and they each have different notes to sing, and they pile up on top of each other at exactly the same time. That's called harmony, okay, where the notes pile up on top of each other. Whereas when one note follows the next, that's called melody. Okay, so we've been learning about how melody works. Now we are going to be learning about harmony. Okay, so the one is horizontal, that moves across, the melody moves across, and the other one is vertical, which means that we're talking about music that's lined up on top of each other, that happens simultaneously. All right, so let's look at the terminology that we're going to be using. The first thing is a triad. Now, if we look at that word carefully, tri means three. Like if you have a tricycle, you know, the bike with 3 wheels, tricycle means 3, okay? 3 wheels. But triad in music means 3 notes which are played at exactly the same time. Then we also have something called a chord. Now, a chord is 3 or more notes played simultaneously. It may look as though they are exactly the same thing, but a triad can only have 3 notes, whereas a chord can have 3 notes, or 4 notes, or 5 notes, or 6 notes, and so on, okay? So a chord has a bigger meaning than triad. Now, I want to demonstrate to you, using a piano, the difference between melody and harmony, and then so that you can hear what a triad is, a triad and a chord, okay? So let me play for you on the piano those 3 notes that we discussed earlier on in the harmonic series. Here's C. Oh, it's not coming on. Sorry, this is the thing about digital things. They're not acoustic, so they don't work all the time. See if it will come on. Good. All right. So here's C, E, G. At the moment, I'm playing them one after each other. Okay? Listen. 1, 2, 3. They happen one after each other. But a triad is when we play them all together like this. Okay? So instead of having them separately, which is melodic, we have them all together, which is harmonic. Harmony, okay? A triad has only 3 notes, 1, 2, 3, okay? A chord can have 3 notes like that or more. So you can have this as a chord. This has got 4 notes, okay? Or even 5, okay? So a chord can have more than 3 notes. It can have 3 notes, but it can also have more than 3 notes. Are you all with me so far? Are there any questions so far about what I've described about harmony and melody and triads and chords? Any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. I don't see any coming up through the chat, so I'm going to continue. Right, triads and chords are often built by piling thirds on top of each other. So we've learned about the interval of a third. Remember, that's where, let's say, if you have the notes C and G, where C is the lowest note. If we count C, D, E, it's a third, right? So triads and chords are often constructed using thirds piled up on top of each other. Okay, so if you wanted to build a triad on C, you would add 2 notes to it like this. You'd have C to E, okay, that's the first third, and then E to G, which is the second third. A third at the bottom, a third at the top. C, E, G. The C is at the bottom, the E is next, the G is at the top. The distance between the C and the E is a third, and the distance between the E and the G is also a third. The root of a triad is the note of the scale degree on which it is based. So if we're looking at the chord C, E, G, like you see on your screen now, the root of that chord is C, because we started with the note C and then we went up a third and then we went up another third. So the root note, the most important note of that chord is C. Think of a plant. A plant has a root and then a stem and let's say a flower at the top. Think of a triad as the bottom note, or the note on which the triad is based is called the root, okay? Without the root, you don't have a plant, right? So the same with a triad. Without the root of the triad, you don't have a triad. The stem is like the note E, and the flower at the top is like the note G. Okay, so you've got the root, the stem, and the flower, C, E, G. All right. So this is what it would look like if we were to write it on the stave. Remember, when you are writing melodies, that is notes that come one after each other, then you would write them across the stave. But when you want music to happen at exactly the same time, or different notes to be played at the same time, they have to be written directly underneath each other. Okay, so if we look at these notes over here, when they're on top of each other like this, it means play or sing all of the notes together at the same time. Okay, so if you look at the C, sorry, where is my pointer there? C, okay. If we played the C and the E together and the G together, we'd be saying that is a triad. The bottom note is called the root. Okay, that's the note on which the chord is based. The next note above it is called the third. And the reason for that is because it's 3 notes above. From C to E, C, D, E is 3. So it's called the third. And the top note is called the fifth. And that is because from the bottom note to the top note is 5. So here's C, here's G. We've got C, D, E, F, G, 5. So the bottom note of a triad is called the root. The next note up is called the third. And the next note up is called the fifth. If we think again to that flower and the stem and the roots are called the root, The stem is called the third, and the flower is called the fifth. We sometimes call the root the base, but you'll see why we don't always call the root the base a little bit later. Okay. Now, we have already learned the degrees of the scale. Can anybody tell me what the degrees of the scale are, starting from tonic, if we were going up the scale? Tonic is the first note. What's the second note?
Supertonic.
Supertonic, correct. Okay, what's the third note?
The median.
Correct. What's the fourth note?
Subdominant.
Correct. What's the fifth note?
Dominant.
Yes. What's the sixth note?
Submedian.
And the seventh?
The leading note.
Leading note.
The leading note. Now, when we are writing harmony, so that's notes underneath each other, we use Roman numerals, okay? Not numbers like 1, 1, 2, 3, and so forth, okay? So if you look at the screen now, the tonic is the first note, which has got a 1 like that, okay? 1 I. The supertonic, 2 I's together. The mediant, 3 I's. The subdominant, an I and a V. The dominant, V. The submediant, V1, or V and I. And the leading note, V, I. These are called Roman numerals. Okay, it's the way that the Romans used to count. So when we are writing chords out, which are based on any of the degrees of the scale, then we use a Roman numeral. So let's say we are going to write a triad on C, then we'd label it with a 1 like this. If we were going to write a triad starting on F, we would label it IV, okay, or 4. And if we were going to write it on the G, if we were going to write a triad there, we would call it V or 5. All right, these are things that you're going to have to learn by heart. Okay, if you are not familiar with the Roman numeral system, you'll need to learn all of these and how they work. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Remember that the top note of a scale is the tonic again, because it's the same letter name as the beginning. That's C, this is C. That's the tonic, this is the tonic. So here is a picture of all of the triads and in C major, okay? This is the C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, just like the scale that we had in the last slide, okay? But what I've done here is I've made them into triads. So this one has got C, E, G. That is triad number 1 in C major, because its root is C, okay? And because the first degree of the scale of C is C, that's number 1. Then we've got chord number 2. Chord number 2 is based on D, which is the second note of C major. That's got D, F, A. Okay, do you see how all of these triads are constructed in the same way? You simply start with the root note, you go to the next space and the next space, or you start with the root note and you go to the next line and the next line. See, it's fairly simple to create a triad. Now, sometimes this whole setup here, where you've got all of the triads set up in a row, is called a triad or chord table. Okay? Do you see how they've all been labeled? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. I'll go into why these ones are in small letters and why these ones are in capital letters just now. Okay. Now in jazz notation, for those of you who are going to do jazz, things work a little bit differently. In jazz, the chords are labeled not by Roman numerals, but by the letter name of the root. So here's the chord 1, which starts on a C. It's simply given the name C. When you see C in jazz notation, it stands for the triad C, E, G. Then for D, you have D minor. Now we'll talk about the minor chords a little bit later, okay? There are 3 minor chords when you are dealing with the major key. Chord 2, chord 3, and chord 6. And there are 3 major chords, chord 1, 4, and 5. And then there's the special case for B, which is a diminished. But you see that the letter names are still there. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. So they follow the order of the scale. And the chords are constructed in exactly the same way. You see that? They've all got the triad set up in the same way. All right, so now we have different types of triads. We've got things called primary triads and secondary triads. The primary triads, when primary means first, okay? Secondary means second. You know, at school, primary school is the first division of our schooling. Secondary school is high school. Tertiary education, tertiary means third, is what you're at now, university, okay? So there's primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. We are dealing with primary chords, so these are number 1 chords. These are the most important chords, okay? And they are tonic, dominant, and subdominant. If we were to give tonic, dominant, and subdominant numbers from the scale, what would their numbers be? Which degree of the scale would they be? What degree of the scale?
1, 5, 4.
1 is tonic, 5 is dominant, and subdominant is 4. Let me just go back to show you that again. We look at this picture here. There's the tonic, number 1. Here is the subdominant, number 4. And there is the dominant, number 5. Okay, those are the primary triads, 1, 4, and 5. And you see that I use capital IV here and capital V for the primary triads. We use capital letters in the Roman numeral system for the primary triads. So primary triads are 1, 4, and 5. Tonic, subdominant, and dominant. Okay, let's have a look at those triads. I've put them here so that you can see them in color. Sorry, I've just got to get all the way there again now. Right, here's the picture. 1, 4, 5. In C major, that's the C chord, the F chord, and the G chord, or the C triad, the F triad, and the G triad. Okay, those are the primary triads. If you're dealing, that's for a major key, okay? If you're dealing with the minor key, the minor key also has primary triads, and they are the same. Chord 1, chord 4, and chord 5, or triad 1, triad 4, and triad 5. So major and minor, the primary chords are the same, 1, 4, and 5. When we write triads in a minor key, you must use the harmonic minor scale. I don't know if you remember this. When we were learning minor scales, and I was saying there is the natural minor, there is the harmonic minor, and the melodic minor, 3 different types of minor keys. And I said at a later stage, I will explain to you why one is called the harmonic and why one is called the melodic. Well, now I'm going to explain to you why. Okay. The harmonic minor scale is used for writing harmony, that is notes above each other. Remember I said that the notes that happen at exactly the same time is called harmony, whereas notes that come one after each other is called melody. So the harmonic minor scale is the one that we use when we are writing triads and chords. When we are writing melodies, we use the melodic minor scale. Okay, that's why we've got those 2 different types. Remember that the harmonic minor scale, you only raise the 7th degree. Okay, only the 7th degree. So here I've written the chords in B minor. The 2, if you look at your chord, your key table, key signature table, you'll see that B minor has an F sharp and a C sharp. Okay, there's B, C, D, E, F, G, and there's the A sharp, a note that is raised, the 7th note. Okay, when you are writing the triads, the important thing is that you always put the 7th note as a sharp. So in chord 5, you've got F sharp and the 7th note of the scale, A sharp and C sharp. Okay. We'll get more and more practice with that as you go along. So don't panic if you're worried about that. The raised 7th. So if we're the one that we've just been looking at, the raised 7th of the minor key affects 3 of the triads in a minor key. The mediant means 3. So the chord on number 3, the 3rd note, the dominant, that's chord 5, and the leading note chord. So if we were to take the B minor scale, chord 3 starts on the 3rd note of B. B, C, D, right? So there's D, there's the D. A 3rd higher than that is F sharp, and a 3rd higher than that has the 7th note of the scale in it, A sharp. The dominant has F sharp, A sharp is the 7th note of the scale, and C sharp. And the leading note starts on the raised 7th, A sharp, C sharp, E. Okay. So those are the primary triads. Primary triads, 1, 4, 5. The secondary triads in the major and minor keys are the chords on the supertonic, the mediant, and the submediant. So 2, 3, and 6. Okay, let's have a look at G major. Here's G major. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. If you look at your key signature table, you'll see that G major has 1 sharp. Okay, so the secondary triads are the triad on number 2, number 3, and number 6. Okay, the same is true in the minor keys. Here's B minor, 2, 3, 6. Okay, secondary triads 2, 3, and 6. So primary triads are 1, 4, 5. Secondary triads are 2, 3, 6. Okay. Each of the secondary triads is related to a primary triad. Now you'll remember that relationships are quite strong in music. We've spoken about how a major key is related to a minor key. Okay. And we've also spoken about how modes are related to each other because they share the same key signature. Okay. Well, the same is true in chords and triads. There are triads that are related to each other, and they are related to each other because they share 2 notes in common. Okay, so chord 3 or triad 3 is related to triad 5. Triad 2 is related to triad 4, and triad 6 is related to triad 1. I want to show you what that actually means. Okay. Here is chord 5, right? G, B, D. Its relative, the one that it's related to, is chord 3. Now, what's happened to my pointer? There's chord 3. Okay. Do you notice that it has, now what's going on here? It's also got a G and a B. See, that note has, that triad has got G and B. This one has also got G and B. So it's got two notes that are the same. It shares the same DNA. The only difference is that this note, this triad has an E. This one doesn't have an E, but it has a D. Okay, so that's why they are related. The same is true of 4. There's triad 4. It's related to triad 2. You see that these two notes over here, these two notes over here, F and A, are also in chord 2. There's F and A. You see, they share two notes. So the primary triads are related to the secondary triads. The primary triads are 1, 4, 5. The secondary triads are 2, 3, and 6. And the triads that are related to each other are 1 and 6, 2 and 4, and 3 and 5. Now that might be a huge amount for you to take in. So don't worry if you are struggling a little bit. What will happen is we'll need to practice with these things so that you can see how they work. Okay. Right. So let me show you. Let's stop sharing the screen here. I just want to get your textbook up so that I can show you the exercises that you will do. Where is it now? Worksheet 7. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen with you now. Here is question 1 from your worksheet. Can you all see it? Okay. So it says here, write the tonic triad in root position, and we'll talk about root position in a minute, of the following keys without key signature. So we find G major. What we would do then is to write out the scale of G major. And to do that, we'd have to go to the our key table and work out how many sharps or flats G major has. We'd write out the scale of G major. Then above each note of this G major scale, we would create a triad so that we'd have all of the triads lined up like I did in those pictures that we saw in the slides earlier on, okay? And then we'd look for the tonic triad. That is the one that is on number 1. And we would write that over here. The tonic triad would have to have 3 notes in it. Okay, we'll look at that again just now once we've finished this next section. All right, so I'm going to discuss now a little bit more with you about triads. We're going to look at another PowerPoint presentation. Before we continue, are there any questions so far? I just want to make sure that I'm sorry. Just want to make sure that I've got the right slides up here. the wrong slides. I just want to get the right slides for us. Sorry. Otherwise, I'm going to teach you something too early, and I don't want to teach you something that is going to make you panic too soon. Okay, let's see. Chord positions. That's the one that I wanted. Okay. Sorry for the delay. All right. Tell me when you can see the screen. Okay. Now let's have a look at the pictures over here. It says, examine these triads. They all contain the notes C, E, and G. Okay. If we look at this one, C, E, G. This one, that's a C over there. There's the E, there's the G. So it's still got C, E, and G. And this one, here's C, here's G, and here's E. Are they the same? Or are these triads different? Well, if we look at the bottom note of each of these triads, the bottom note here is a C. The bottom note here is an E. And the bottom note here is a G. They've all got the same letter name notes, C, E, and G, okay? So if this was in C major, this would be the tonic triad. All of these are the tonic triad because they all have the notes C, E, and G. But they are not the same, and they don't sound the same either, because in each case, the bottom note is different, and the other notes have been pushed up higher than they were before. All right, so this phenomenon is called triad inversions. Let's have a look what that means. Let's go back to that picture that we had in the last set of slides, where we spoke about the bottom note, or the note that you would have created the triad on. So if you'd written out the scale, let's say you'd written out the C major scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then on each of those notes, you had created a triad. The note on which you based that triad is called the root. Okay. The note just above that is called the third, and the note above that, the fifth. But I also said to you, we sometimes call the root a bass, but it's not always the bass. And the reason that I said that is that the bottom note of a triad or chord is called the bass. But we've seen in this picture here that the bass note or the bottom note is different in some cases. Here it's a C, here it's an E, here it's a G. All right. So the bass note is not always the root. All right. Triads can be in 3 positions. Root position, where the root note is in the bass. First inversion, where the third is in the bass. And second inversion, where the fifth is in the bass. Let me try and explain to you what that means, okay? So root position, this is where, this is the note on which you based the triad. So when you wrote out the scale. Here's C, here's E, here's G. The root, the fifth, the root, the third, and the fifth. Root position is where the root is in the bass. But we also saw that second type of the same chord where E was at the bottom. Now, the third of the chord of the triad is in the bass. and the root has moved up over here. So the root is no longer over there at the bottom, is it? When the third of the triad is in the bass, we call it first inversion. And then if the fifth is at the bottom of the triad and the root and the third are above it, that's when we talk about it being in second inversion. Okay. Notice all of these chords have the same notes in them, C, E, and G. Okay. C, E, G, E, G, C, G, C, E. They are just in a different order each time. Okay. But that the note that is at the bottom is different. Root is root position. Third is first inversion. Fifth is second inversion. So in the last slide, we looked at the triad based on C. In C major, the C triad is the tonic triad, the number 1 triad. So we would normally label it with a 1, a capital 1. But then how do we indicate what position it is in? So if we put a 1 under each of those things, it wouldn't tell us that the root or the third and the fifth is in the bass. So usually we indicate the intervals from the bass according to the 2 notes above it. So if we look at root position, there's C. And from C to E, C, D, E is a third, okay? And from C to the top note, C to G, is C, D, E, F, G, a fifth, all right? So we call the root position chord 1, 5, 3, because from the bass to the second note is a third, from the bass to the third note is a fifth. Okay, now that's the technical way of writing it. But if the chord is in root position, usually nowadays we don't even actually include the 5 and 3. We just write 1. Or if it's chord 4, we write chord 4. In first inversion, when we look at the distances between the notes, from the bottom note to the second note, from E to G is E, F, G. It's also a third. But from the bottom note to the top note, E, F, G, A, B, and C is a sixth. Okay? So we sometimes call this 6-3 position. So if we were labeling this as chord 1, we would write chord 1, 6, 3. Nowadays, though, we leave out the 3 altogether and we just write 1, 6. Okay? So if it's root position, you just write the 1. If it's first inversion, 1 with a little 6 next to it. Now let's work out the intervals from the bottom note in the second inversion. From G to C, G, A, B, C, it's a fourth, okay? And from G to E, G, A, B, C, D, E is a sixth. So we would call this chord 1, 6, 4. 6, 4. So root position, you just write 1, or if it's on another degree of the scale, 4 or 5 or whatever, okay? For first inversion, you write a little 6. And for second inversion, you write 6, 4. Okay? So let's have a look at this. Here's a root position triad. Okay, C is at the bottom, E, G. You see, it's just got a 1. Here we have chord 1, C, E, G, but where the root note, the bottom note is E. Okay, it's in first position or first inversion. That's called 1, 6. And when the G is at the bottom and the C and E are above it, it's 1, 6, 4. Now in jazz notation, a root position triad is just C. A first inversion chord, you first put chord C, and then you put the note name, which is in the bass. In this case, it's E, okay? And the same is true here. First the chord slash, and then the bass note, which is G. So that's what we are dealing with today. Just triads and their positions. So what I need you to do this week is to try and practice these things, okay? It's only through practice that you are going to work out how the system works. It's easy to explain it on a set of slides, but now we have to put it into practice. So I'm going to share with you one example so that you can see how this works. I just need to open up a Word file for us. And I'm going to use, just want to get the pictures out of here. I'm going to use C major scale. Let me just get the notes right for us. All right, so I'm going to share the screen with you now. All right, tell me when you can see it.
Yes, sir. We can see.
When you go onto your key signature table, you will see that C major has no sharps or flats. So I've just written out all of the notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And underneath it, I've labeled each chord according to the Roman numerals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's your first step. Your second step is then to create a chord table. Okay. And I'm going to put that in for you now. There is the chord table. And again, I would underneath it, sorry, you just move this up here. Underneath it, I would label each chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Who can remind me which triads are the primary triads? Which triads are primary?
The tonic, subdominant, and the dominant.
Correct. So let's make those red. Which triads are secondary? Nobody?
The second, third, and the sixth.
Okay, let's put those in green. Chord 7 is always in a class of its own. It always gets a little 0 like that above it to indicate that it's diminished, and we'll learn about that next week. Okay, so our primary triads are 1, 4, 5. Our secondary triads are 2, 3, and 6. Now imagine that our question says, just make sure that I'm doing this right. Imagine that the questions, oh, sorry. Just get this right. Sorry, I lost my place. Imagine that the question says, please write out the tonic, the dominant, and the subdominant triads in C major. Let's imagine that is our question. All right. So we would go to our table and we'd identify chord 1, chord 4, and chord 5. So we would write these out. If the question said, write out the triads of the tonic, subdominant, and dominant in C major, we would write out this one, and this one. Okay. If the question said, write out the triads in the of the tonic, subdominant, and dominant in root position in C major, we would also write out exactly the same. This one, and this one. They're exactly the same because root position is where the note on which it is based is at the bottom. And all of these are in root position because these are where the chords are based. We've based the chord, the tonic chord, on C. We've based the subdominant chord on F, and we've based the dominant chord on G. Okay. Now, this next question, I cannot show you on Word. I'd have to show you how to do that using a piece of paper. So I'm just going to fetch a piece of paper quickly so that I can show it up for you. Okay, so just hold it for me. All right. So the first thing you would do is to rule yourself some lines. And we'll do these in the treble clef just so that you can see how it works. Now let's say that the question said, write these triads in first inversion. So we need to remind ourselves, what does first inversion mean? And first inversion, we've been doing all of them in root position. In first inversion, the bass note is the third of the triad. Okay. So if we had to write out the triads in first inversion, we would need to make sure that the bottom note is the third of the chord. So if we look at chord 1, C is the root, E is the third, and G is the fifth. When we look at chord 4, F is the root, A is the third, and C is the fifth. In chord 5, what is the root? Which note is the root? this one that I'm pointing at.
G.
G. What's the third? This note over here.
B.
Yes. And what's the fifth? This note. D. All right. So let's go back to chord 1. If we had to write this in first position or first inversion, the E would need to be at the bottom. So we write the E at the bottom, the G above it, and we push the C to the top. I've written that for you here. There is root position where the C is at the bottom. Here's first inversion. Now the E is at the bottom. Okay. So if we were asked to write the triad in first inversion, that's what it would look like. This is the one we would be writing, where the third of the triad is at the bottom in the bass, and the other notes are above it. Okay. If we were asked to write chord 1 in second inversion, then we would need to have the G at the bottom. So it would look like this: G, C, E. This is root, first, second. Root, the first inversion is where E is at the bottom. The second inversion is where G is at the bottom. Now I'll do the same for you for chord 4. So if we were to do chord 4 in root position, that's what it would look like. That's the easiest part, where it's exactly the same as on the chord table, right? In first inversion, we would need to put the A at the bottom of the chord and push the F up to the top. Do you see how I've done it there? You see
Yes,
how
sir.
A is now at the bottom. And if we were to do it in second inversion, now the fifth of the chord is at the bottom and the other two are above it. Okay. Now, how would we label those? We would write a 4 under each of them. So like that. Okay, they're all chord 4. The root one, you just write 4 on its own. For the first inversion, you write 4, 6. Do you see that I've written a little 6 over there? Okay, that's for the one where the third of the chord is at the bottom. And for the one where the fifth of the chord is at the bottom, you write 4, and there's a, you can't really see it there. I've written it a bit indistinctly, 6, 4. Let me just write that 6 a bit bolder. 4, 6, 4. That's where the fifth of the fifth is at the bottom of the chord. So your exercises this week for the worksheet are writing triads and putting them in root position, in first inversion, and in second inversion. That's pretty much all that you're going to be doing this week, okay? My suggestion is, and let me share the screen so that you can see it. So I've just got to find it now. Where is it? Let's take these away. It's disappeared. Where is it? Let me try again. Sorry about that. Ah, here it is now. All right. If you look at your screen, it says write the tonic triad in root position in the following keys without key signature. G major, E flat major, D minor, F sharp minor. So in these lines underneath here, write out the scale of G major, write out the scale of E flat major, write out the scale of D minor, write out the scale of F sharp minor, and then put the triads above them, okay? So in those lines, write the triads. Then you'll see this, the keys stay the same throughout. G major, E flat major, D minor, F sharp. I just asked for different triads. So this time, the dominant triad in root position, okay? And then the subdominant triad in root position. All right. That's easy. You're just writing everything in root position this week. So I want you to concentrate on that and do worksheet 7 for me and then send it back to me. Okay. Now, are there any questions about what we've discussed today?
Sir, could you just please explain the relations between the primary and the secondary? Okay.
Yes. So the primary triad, each primary triad is related to a secondary triad. And the reason that they're related is because they share 2 notes in common, okay? So let me find the, let me just find a picture of that for you so that I can explain it again. Just hang 10 while I open the file, please. And let me show you. What I mean. All right. So here is one of the primary triads, chord 4. Okay. Chord 4 in C major, we're in C major here because it starts on a C, has got F, A, and C. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Related secondary chord is chord 2. The reason is because chord 2 also has an F and an A. See, there's the F and the A, and here's F and A. They have 2 notes in common. Only 1 note out of the 3 is different for each case. That's why they are related. Okay, so 2 and 4 are related. 3 and 5 are related. And 1 and 6 are related. You'll see if you look here, there's a C and an E in chord 1. Or if we look at it from this one, there's C and there's E. Here's also C and E. They share 2 notes. So the relationship is they're related because they share 2 notes.
2 notes. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. The reason that you learn that is actually important only for work that you're going to do next year, okay? Where you start to put chords together in succession, and sometimes you can substitute a secondary chord for a primary chord, okay? So if there was chord 4, you could put chord 2 in its place, okay? But you'll really deal with that next year.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Are there any other questions? All right, now I just want to point out to you that next Monday you have an assessment task. and it will be handed out as normal at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you'll have to return it by midday. I've already put on WhatsApp what's going to be in that test or assessment, and triads will be in that assessment, but it'll only be the kind of triad work that you've done for worksheet 7. Okay, so I'm asking you this week to submit worksheet 7 by Friday so that I can mark it for you on Friday and give it back to you, and you can look at it over the weekend to see that you're on the right track. Okay, so don't hand it in on Monday, it'll be too late by then. Okay, hand it in on Friday. I'll mark it for you and get it to you as quickly as possible over the weekend, so that you are ready for the assessment on Monday. Okay. Then, just to say, if you are still feeling insecure about key signatures and scales, or if in the first assessment you got a lot wrong in key signatures and scales, please, you must go and see the tutor this week. Okay, I hope some of you are going to see the tutor on a regular basis, but if you're still struggling with those and you're not getting them right, you need to get those right for this semester. If there's anything else that you don't get right, those are the things that count the most for when you are learning next semester. Then practice intervals. Okay, go over the intervals that we've already done in class. If you can find other examples, do those. If you want more examples, ask me and I'll provide them for you. Okay, the only way to get better at doing intervals is to do them over and over again. All right, that's all that we're going to do today. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions during the week relating to your assessment or how to prepare, please feel free to ask. Thank you for your time and have a good afternoon.